Hello, welcome to this session about how Oracle's supply chain use supply chain manufacturing cloud to be future ready. My name is Giovanni Schoordijk. I'm in Oracle's hardware supply chain. And in 2018, we transitioned from a set of EBS and VCP applications to a fully cloud-enabled supply chain. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how that went, how we approached it, what the benefits are, and our learnings. But before I do so, I'd like to give you a bit of context, what hardware and what supply chain means to Oracle. You might know Oracle better from our application and database software, but Oracle has had a hardware supply chain since the acquisition of Sun Microsystems in 2010. And where we came from is on the right hand of this slide. Sun Microsystems and Oracle have been active in on-premise technology for enterprise computing for a long time. So that's what you see on this slide. It included at the time also particular industry-specific solutions for the technology sector, as well as for the telecommunication industry, as well as, I guess, different industry solutions for both hospitality and retail. The example here on this slide specifically is a Micros workstation. And Micros is one of our business units that services the retail and hospitality world. And that's a part of our business that's a little bit more high volume and built to forecast. But the rest of our computing technology is all enterprise focused. And over the years, certainly the last 2 to 3 years, we've shifted step by step much more to the left of this slide. So today, our activities are predominantly focused on enterprise computing that we deploy through the cloud. All of the hardware that runs Oracle's cloud, the cloud that runs database applications, application software that you might be using, that's all based on Oracle hardware technology that we design and deliver. So over the years, last 3 years in particular, our focus has shifted quite dramatically from supporting an on-premise business and industry to supporting our own cloud build-out. And you can understand that the requirements on our supply chain as a result of that changed substantially as well. I won't talk about the middle very much here, but we do have a hybrid solution as well where we can deploy the same technology behind a customer's firewall. It's essentially the same technology, the same hardware solutions, just deployed differently. But what I wanted to do is give you a sense of scope and scale first as well, so you can relate to it a little bit better. And I'll start at the top left. We have an internal manufactured or internal manufacturing site still, I should say, although the bulk of our volumes are outsourced. We work with 4 essential contract manufacturers that produce, assemble, and test the majority of the hardware that goes into our data centers as well as customer data centers. But again, we still in Hillsboro, Oregon, have a site that we manage ourselves, where we do the smaller volume products that are a little bit more of the niche and the unique and dedicated technology portion of our portfolio. In the planning space, most of our technology is built based on a postponement methodology using the configure to order concept. So that means that we plan for configure to order structures as well, not at the level of finished good products that sit on the shelf, but components that we at the last minute assemble into a final solution as being tested there. So 200 models, but a lot more variability underneath with all the different elements that make up the configure to order solution. So we plan for all that individually across 19 individual dropship organizations. So it's dispersed across the world, really globally in scope. We cover, from a delivery standpoint, almost all, certainly all developed countries, but almost all developing countries as well, in any part of the world that you can think of. On the bottom end, our supplier scope is really quite broad. We work with key suppliers that provide certain elements of technology for us, but do, I guess, collaboration with only a portion of that, about 60% of the 100 suppliers. And that means forecast synchronization. That means order execution transactions, obviously, for the ones where we ship directly from their origin points. But they're a key part of our supply chain and how we build and deliver products. terms of product scope, about 5,000 orderable items is what we manage on a day-by-day basis. Not all of that are regular price listed item. A portion of that is field replaceable units, spares as well. So that explains that high number. But underneath the orderable items, our bills of materials are very complicated and large. So in terms of the total amount of items that we manage, it's substantially higher. The last count was more than 40,000 even. So big numbers there. Order fulfillment transactions. There are consolidated deliveries that we do, sometimes for cloud as well, but mostly for our on-premise business. So about 40,000 orders a year for the both areas combined. So high numbers. Scale is important to us, maybe not as critical as people in the packaged goods industry, but still we need to design for scale and for repeatability. What I'll come up to a little later as well, our product structures are a mix of configure to order and pick to order. And that's why I called out earlier the Micros terminal specifically. That's an example of the product that we forecast, particularly at the end item, and then hold on the shelf for orders to arrive and to be fulfilled. But the majority of the technology platform or portfolio is assembled to order and configure to order. If you prefer that term. Why did we consider cloud? You might wonder. I mentioned our shift from a customer sweet spot standpoint, historically on-premise focused, in the last 3 to 5 year, dramatically switching to cloud. We needed to solution and organize our supply chain very differently to meet the scale and the nature of the cloud. And we were struggling with our existing applications previously. I'll show you later on what we implemented and when in the past, but we were essentially still 2 releases behind. Even as an Oracle organization using Oracle on-premise technology, we weren't running the most up-to-date suite of software. And responding to these changing requirements was hard for us, whether it's moving locations, source points, dealing with different requirements from a customer standpoint. It took us too much effort to change our tool sets and our application footprint to be able to be responsive and nimble enough. So we really needed to do something different. And we wanted to have access to the innovation that is being driven by our product development teams around user interfaces, how people navigate the data that's presented together or alongside the transaction environment, concepts like AI and machine learning that recommend certain courses of actions. These innovations were not accessible to us in our previous application footprint, and they are now. And it was one of the key drivers for us to consider cloud. We also needed to be more efficient. The cost pressures, particularly in the cloud industry, are possibly even more demanding than they are for on-premise. And we needed to look for rationalization, optimization, efficiency, scale in order to answer those requirements more effectively. And we also want, and that's why I'm talking to you today, wanted to show similar customers or similar supply chain organizations what you can do with Oracle's supply chain management or supply chain manufacturing application suite. So these 4 things really told us that this was the right thing for us to do. This slide is a summary for those of you who wonder what we have implemented and what's relevant for Oracle supply chain today. You might recognize the SCORE model in the middle: plan, source, make, deliver. In the planning space, we use essentially everything that's relevant for the nature of a business, including sales and operations planning for synchronization with our upstream organizations, collaboration intensively, given that we're highly outsourced. In the sourcing area, we use the direct and indirect procurement modules, global order promising to organize order routing specifically and promising itself, the portal for communication of the detail with our suppliers, all kinds of costing setups and costing processes to make sure that the financial side is handled well. The manufacturing area, discrete manufacturing is what we use, probably not a surprise. We use inventory management, the Fusion inventory management module as well, and a variety of BI, OTBIs, what you might recognize, solutions that provide reporting and intelligence solutions for us, not just in the manufacturing space, but that's where it's heavily used. And in the delivery area, we're now an Oracle Transportation Management user. We didn't use that before. We are largely outsourced in the logistics area, depending on our 3PL to do much of that for us. But we are using transportation management as well for shipment routing in particular and some documentation generation. So that's part of our footprint. Global trade management is used. That's very important for us to stay compliant. And as mentioned earlier, we use dropship fulfillment mostly for our outsourced manufacturing and deliveries. It's a key part of our solution set, although our internal manufacturing solution does play a bit of a role as well, and that's referred to under IM. At the bottom level, that's really the product master solution that I wanted to refer to there. That plays a key role in aligning and integrating these various applications and make sure they work off that same sheet of music and talk to each other in a language that they understand. So our product development and product hub solutions really play that glue, the common product master that really, I guess, provide this integration point for all these functional applications. And we use quality and IoT solutions as well. The top end orchestration, clearly making the product master available isn't enough. You need to make sure that transactions are synchronized as well, whether that's just around timing between the sales order modules and the purchase order modules as an example, or the financial modules that take care of the AP and AR transactions earlier or later. What I've listed there too is applications that provide input to supply chain that we don't technically manage ourselves, order management. The configurator, the CPQ solution is an example of that. We leverage all of these applications, again, as inputs to supply chain. So they're a key essence or a key element of our solution set. And I'd like to take you now to what is happening in supply chain and the reality in which we're trying to be successful. You might recognize some of this. This is presenting some distinct challenges for us and opportunities at the same time as well. Everything, as I think you know, is becoming increasingly connected. And when I say that, I don't think about cell phones necessarily, but I'm thinking about sensors. I'm thinking about sensors in the manufacturing environment as an example, not just transportation track and trace sensors, but things like temperature sensors, particle counts, dust levels, things like that, as well as connectivity between organizations that were really quite difficult to establish in the past, beyond organizational boundaries, connecting functional areas as well between, let's say, planning and the quality applications that we use as an example to make sure information is shared, or between costing and delivery, where information needs to be made available for the right decisions to be made. So solving for an end-to-end challenge has become more and more possible and a real opportunity in many areas where in the past that wasn't the case. Disruption, I know I'm not telling you anything different. The last 2 to 3 years have been unique in a way that things that we took for granted suddenly changed dramatically. It, for us, started with the geopolitical tensions that really escalated for the US, but elsewhere too. And then the pandemic, obviously, with implications for procurement, manufacturing, physical movement, workforce, lots of unexpected challenges that we had to respond to and deal with. And what we learned is that where in the past, maybe to an extent, the thinking was that what you don't know can't hurt you, but we've really found that that's in supply chain not the case. And we were surprised by some hidden vulnerabilities and concentrations of risk that had we thought about that a little bit more consciously earlier on, we probably would have decided or designed for differently. So that has changed our perspective on risk management quite significantly. The trade-off between cost and resilience these days is very different as a result. And we're willing to make investments in areas that in the past we thought weren't needed or not justified. So that's really clearly changing our calculations and our changes, our decision making in that area. On the environmental area, the geopolitical as well as ESG part of our business, it's no longer acceptable to move goods around the world without consideration of both time and cost, as well as, I guess, fuel or energy usage. So increasingly, we're being asked and expected to think about limiting those kinds of activities if there are alternatives. So we're pushed as a supply chain to consider much more, many more local solutions for local requirements. And we need to solve for that in this global footprint still. But we've, in some areas more than others, but we've moved away from this concept that every challenge is best solved with a single global answer. So tailoring the solutions, market by market, industry by industry, and sometimes product line by product line, has become much more critical for us. So a driver for our design decisions there. So now let me talk about how we use this to respond to some of the reality, I guess the questions that have come up in the last 2 to 3 years in the reality of managing supply chain these days. And the global geopolitical challenges clearly pushed us to consider more than just final assembly sites in the Far East in China. We had a number of technologies that we assembled at that point in time only in the Far East, only in China. And the tariffs that were applied for all of the US deliveries really made that much less attractive. And that made us decide to spun up a mirror site, essentially, a second site within the US within about 6 months. The tool sets allowed us to do that, allowed us to test it quickly, work with partners efficiently. So that's been a big success for us. We were quite early, to be honest, in recognizing that, and that helped us. But it prepared us for some of the downstream implications that weren't entirely known at the time. But bottom line is that we created mirror sites as a result of that, and are a lot more flexible and nimble to deal with surprises down the road around import-export limitations or tariffs or things like that. And then when the pandemic hit us, we were presented with challenges that were quite different, even more so in terms of facilities not being reachable anymore, being locked off completely, resources not being able to do the work from locations that they normally would do. So that pushed us to even more so use the concept of remote working or working from everywhere to I guess the farthest possibilities. And we're still today, to a large extent, a remote organization. We do our work, whether it's in planning or in logistics management or in supplier management, mostly from locations all across the world, the US, Europe, Asia, elsewhere. And very little these days is still done from an office environment. We likely will go back to that for certain activities, but still the fact that we can do everything from a browser, essentially, has helped us tremendously to adjust to that reality and deal with the challenges it presented. I mentioned earlier already creating a second source for technology that was China-based. So that's another mindset almost, or a direction that we're taking in other areas as well. We deal differently with risk management and with redundancy and resilience as a result, both at the final assembly level as well as at the component level. One example, we implemented in a few months, in 4 months roughly, a centralized component sourcing solution. So in the interest of risk pooling mostly, we decided to not have our contract manufacturers individually source key components that they depend on, but play a stronger role in that as an Oracle organization and centralize a lot of these activities. So again, that we risk pool, as well as when there are allocation decisions to be made, we have a stronger hand in that, and we can direct the material, the constrained material, to the places that we really need it. So that's in place now, about 4 months, as I mentioned, to implement that. So in general, the speed that the supply chain management or manufacturing cloud applications provided us with allowed us to respond nimbly and in a way that we really needed to deal with these almost ever-changing requirements. And what has also helped in terms of changing the mindset or the mentality of our organization is the quarterly updates that are part of the Cloud Application Suite. That has really made it more of a natural cadence for us to ask whether the decisions we made last year or last month in some cases are really working for us, and whether a certain change in direction or change in decisions would actually be beneficial. So we find ourselves sometimes fine-tuning and adjusting our process parameters accordingly. And it has really made it almost like a second nature to do that periodically. Not in all areas every quarter, but it's become a more natural process to go through with the business users and the different organizations. Now, I've told you how we're making use of supply chain management cloud applications. Let me talk to you about how we prepared for it and how we made it a success. And we began with the end in mind. Staying on that theme, let me share with you what the supply applications, the cloud applications are doing for us today. At the synchronization level between sales orders that we receive from our customers and purchase orders that we submit to our suppliers, we don't have to manually align and synchronize these transactions anymore, which was the case in our previous set of applications. So that's an area where efficiency improvements are very noticeable and significant. In the planning world, we now generate a full demand to supply cycle within a week, which used to be 3 weeks at best. So that's another increase in speed. For sourcing, purchase order approvals are a lot faster now than they used to be, about a 20% reduction in transactions there. In manufacturing, we were able to take out order tasks and aggregate and simplify the workflows and the work definitions specifically, about a 50% reduction because it's more logical and more optimized. And in the delivery space specifically, document inquiries are much faster, about 60% less in the steps that we need to go through for people that need to have access to that information. At the bottom level, the product master that I talked about earlier on, that has made synchronization a lot quicker as well, and we don't have to deal with discrepancies and mismatches between application areas that are driving a lot of correction work and incorrect decisions. And the speed of executing to a change on a product structure or product attribution with real-time availability of these attributes is obviously much faster. So that's the 90% statement there. So overall, much more nimble processes, integrated information that is available across applications that allows us to respond faster and with better information. But how do we approach this all? What was clear to us from the beginning, when we started to architect the scope and the challenges of our transition, was that we did not want to recreate what we had designed for and implemented in the past. We wanted to start fresh. We wanted to focus on the future of our business, let go of past decisions and maybe sacred horses that people tie to, and looked at the different opportunities in front of us and the different industry standard solutions that could help us become more nimble and sort of stay on this innovation path much better than we were able in the past. So a fresh start, no customizations, as little as we could augmentations through past solutions. We do have a few, but not many, and utilize the cloud applications as much and as best as possible. And we set off thinking that we could do this in one go. We had an initial plan of implementing all of what I showed you earlier on at one point in time. But in order to keep momentum, we decided to take a portion of that and separate it out in an earlier phase. We actually ended up implementing the planning applications a little sooner than the rest of the supply chain suite, but still a single set of solution globally. We didn't go with a country by country rollout as many companies do, in the interest of staying aligned and staying on the same innovation schedule. We invested a lot of time in change management, and we formalized that maybe more so than we've done in the past. We thought about structures that we needed to create to keep the business side and the IT side aligned. We spent a lot of time thinking about adoption by the user organizations and put a framework in place for that, and really maximized, I guess, the knowledge and the insights from the user community as well, and the configuration decisions that we had to make throughout that process. This is an intent to show you how our current situation compares to what our life was before from an innovation standpoint, and how we continuously adjust and adapt. On the left-hand side, an on-premise world where we had highly customized applications utilizing EBS and VCP mostly, and a number of custom solutions around it that made it all work. That was essentially designed and implemented just around the acquisition of Sun Microsystems around 2009, 2010. And we had not changed that until 2014. That was the first time we did a fairly major value chain planning upgrade. And as a result of this, we struggled really to stay up to speed and go with where the market was from a solution and from a feature standpoint. And we needed to do something different. On the right-hand side is our world today. 2018 was when we implemented our first planning solutions, and then later in the year followed with the rest of Supply Chain Cloud. And we've already, I think the count is now 16, if not 17, updates that we took after that initial go live. And we've really got into routine of every quarter, look at what new features are made available to us from the product development organization, decide what applies to us, assess the implications from a user and operational standpoint, train where we need to train. In many cases, it's very minor. In some cases, you do need to spend some attention or pay some attention to changes if it's more fundamental. But it's become a second nature of us to do that in a quarterly routine. We have a strong IT support organization within Oracle that helps us with that. So that's a big plus for us. We don't, as a user organization, have to spend a whole lot of time in things like regression testing to make sure that nothing that worked before is broken now. So I realize that's a benefit of being part of the Oracle family. But still, it's a major benefit and a major value for us, this ongoing innovation cycle that this drives. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's not just taking up new features that are developed for us, but it's also reconsidering maybe past decisions in how we configured the application suite and making changes where that's required or relevant. And now let me summarize how this is all adding value to us. And some of this was mentioned in a different context before, but the reduction of complexity is essential for us. The fact that we're now all on one data model, all these applications that pull the product structure data from the same place, and every set of attributes that need to be synchronized are pulled from the same place. So that's a massive change for us. We used to have this in disparate applications that needed to talk to each other through batch uploads and synchronization jobs, in many cases weekly, sometimes daily. And it has reduced the complexity very significantly, not just from a mismatch standpoint, the things were getting out of sync, but just the time as well that it took to make sure that all these applications were working off the same sheet of music. So that's a big step forward for us. We don't have the synchronization lags anymore that we used to have. We don't have cycles of 2 or 3 weeks simply for systems to catch up with changes upstream. And the workflows itself, for the user, that is, are because it's much easier to pull in data sets from surrounding applications that are relevant in a particular workflow or a particular work area. People don't have to navigate from one solution to another and yet to another to find out certain attributes or data values for decisions to be made. It's much easier to display it in the same work environment and really integrate and aggregate the relevant data for user in one user interface. So that complexity reduction, major step forward. I guess our flexibility to deal with changes that are a reality of all of us in supply chain, even more so than in the past. Mentioned much of this already. The speed in how we plan and how we execute is dramatically different from what it used to be. And I wouldn't want to think about going back to our piecemeal applications we had only a few years ago and having to navigate from one to one, almost like jumping from pedal to pedal in a pool. So that's the past now for us. And it has really driven this innovation cycle, as I just mentioned, to a totally new level. We've already adopted 16 updates after the 2018 implementation, tons and tons of features. And we're on a platform that is scalable and that is adjustable to really deal with these changes in our landscape now. So with that said, let me close with giving you some tips and sharing some learnings that we, I guess, encountered going through this journey. Maybe you can take some advantage of what we tried and what didn't work and what did. So mentioned on the agility side already, don't try to recreate your existing footprint necessarily. Past decisions aren't always a good, I guess, driver or advice for what's best for the future, and be open-minded about solving for a business challenge in a particular way. And what we did was clearly identify a number of key business drivers for us. What makes us unique? What is really differentiating us as a supply chain organization from our competitors? And what do we want to solve for as a priority? And we've focused on that and made some hard decisions on what we needed for the next 2 to 3 years to come, and let everything else fall in place, essentially. Not worried about it so much. If in some areas that meant some change from what we used to do in the past, we accepted that was, I guess, part of the transition, and it's worked out well for us. And it has also opened up our minds to new capabilities or maybe new concepts that we have not entertained or considered in the past that surprised us in some areas. Another area is make sure that you schedule and plan your activities with particular time cycles, so that you make sure that there's a close start and finish of the project and the project activities. It's very hard to contain scope, as you can imagine, in a project like this. And it's much more beneficial to at least make some progress than try to get to the desired solution all in one go. So we've really focused on these incremental implementations, step by step, and build upon a framework that is scalable and that is adjustable to the needs of the business as it evolves. Collaboration may be easy to say, but doesn't come naturally. Think about how you orchestrate that, how you put a structure in place so that that happens, not just because people want to, because the framework reinforces it. Start early and make sure that you focus on both the IT sides and the business sides, whether the IT side is managed internally or whether you work with outside consultants or not. Think about what kind of command structure you need to make sure that decisions that need to be made are made in the right way and with the right consideration and input, and that you track them and that they're communicated consistently as well. And think about how you want to do training as well. Most likely training will not be a one-time event, but you'll have to go with the development of the application suite and bring people along. Managing change in terms of the solution, realize that the change is not just in swapping out one tool for another, but in many cases there's a cultural element to it, particularly around this ongoing innovation. People need to be comfortable with and see the value of ongoing adjustments and the fact that what worked last year might not work as well this year, and reevaluate how things are performing and how things are working, and then make incremental adjustments. So that's a cultural change for some organizations, and don't underestimate that. Make sure also that when you lay out the sequence and when you decide what you do first or later, did you pick a few areas that you believe you can make good progress on reasonably fast? It's important to show momentum or to create momentum by showing success early. And you can do that by time phasing the different areas that you address and repeatedly reinforce the idea and the concept that the organization is on the right path and that incremental change and incremental improvements are benefiting every group, either early or further down the road. And that's the advice that I have for you. Again, it was an exciting journey for us. In the beginning, a fair amount of complexity for us to get our arms around, We've been live now on these applications for more than 4 years, and it's really become a key value for us, a differentiator in terms of staying responsive and adaptive and dealing with our customer requirements the best way possible. So thank you for your time, and I wish you the best.